we're celebrating not just a normal Sunday in ordinary time, but the Solemnity of Saints Peter and Paul. And this is, of course, because of their role in salvation history and their role in Scripture. These two are so important, but also specifically for us who are Latin Catholics, Roman Catholics. It's Peter and Paul who went to Rome, who preached in Rome, who poured out their blood in Rome. These are our specific roots, as opposed to Chaldean Catholics or Byzantine or Ukrainian or whatever. Like in the seminary, there were Syro-Malabar seminarians who are Catholic also. Around here, we don't have almost any Syro-Malabar Catholics, so we never heard of them, but they're from India, and so they trace their apostolic church from the Apostle Thomas, whereas we say we go to Peter and Paul in Rome. So today's a big feast day, but especially for us who are Roman. And we wear red because of blood, because of the blood of the apostles. So Saints Peter and Paul, they served the Lord, they preached, they served as apostles, and then eventually they were both imprisoned and killed in Rome. St. Peter crucified upside down, and St. Paul beheaded by a sword. But why were they killed? Yes, for preaching the gospel, but it's funny because how we understand preaching the gospel is not usually something that anyone would want to kill you for. Probably that means we have a misunderstanding of what it means to preach the gospel. What do we usually think of? Well, I shared the gospel with someone because I told them, actually, this is wrong and this is right, and you shouldn't do that, and you should do this. That's great, but that's so take it or leave it. No, anybody would just say, well, I don't care, and they say whatever, but there's no I need to silence this person from speaking. Maybe we need to kill them. No, instead, when we're talking about the gospel that is preached, we're talking about the account of reality that the gospel gives, that Jesus gives us. The explanation, the account of the whole world and the human person and God and what is important and what is not. Because the gospel gives a certain account of reality, it also means that other accounts of reality, where they conflict with what the gospel teaches, it means we say that they're wrong, they're incorrect, they're false. And if they're false, then to live by them is harmful. So this is now we're getting somewhere with why is it that the gospel they preach leads people to say not only do we have to imprison these apostles, but we have to kill them. And the apostles do pour out their blood because they would rather die than to compromise on the truth that the Lord has given them. So when we have trouble preaching the gospel, it's entrusted to all of us as members of Christ's body and baptized into Jesus. He has entrusted the gospel to us to share. But there are all kinds of reasons why we either don't say anything, or even, when given the certain circumstances, we hide. So there are all these obstacles. Sometimes, but I think very rarely, what keeps us back is a fear of punishment. If I say this, or if someone knows that I love Jesus, then there will be negative consequences. I think sometimes that happens, but not very often, actually. More often, probably, there is a fear of ridicule that we deal with, where, if I let this out, then I'll be made fun of, or they'll think, or talk behind my back, or something like that. But I think actually the biggest thing that happens all the time, more than fear of punishment, more than fear of ridicule, I think actually very often is what keeps us back is that we don't believe it matters whether the gospel is preached or not. And there can be a bunch of reasons. The thing that comes up is it's too awkward. It's not worth it. Or even if you do whatever the opportunity is, say something, share something, it won't change anything, so what's the point? Or we say it's not my job, go call Father Rob, he can talk to this person. Or if I do this, then I'll be misunderstood or labeled or something. This is it's a really dangerous thing when we say it doesn't matter the witness that I can give to the truth of the gospel and the reality of Jesus. Sometimes we do it because we've gotten, I don't know what to call it, but maybe poisoned, just by the idea that, like, okay, well, that's that's great that you believe in that, but there are many paths, so I believe in this, you believe in that, so it doesn't really matter. Or the other one is we say it doesn't matter whether we share the gospel because everyone's going to heaven anyway, right? So why do we have to do something hard or awkward or whatever? What we usually feel as this, like, it doesn't matter too much, which is often a rationalization or a fear of ridicule or something. I think this is actually what's going on, is this unspoken but absolute rule that's just in the air that we breathe. This unspoken absolute rule that religion must be casual. It has to be unserious. At best, it's like a hobby or a club. So we never cross that line then. And a lot of the awkwardness is when it's like, ooh, are you going to talk like this actually matters? Oh, might this have an impact on my life? This kind of, I think, really tyrannical, absolute, but unspoken rule. Like, you can believe in Jesus, you can be committed to your church, but you got to be kind of unserious about it. You got to be kind of casual. This comes out sometimes in just like the assumptions that people have, and when we collide with them. You know, like when you're getting a new job and you say, yes, and I'm a Christian, so Sunday is really important to me. So don't schedule me on these hours because I have to go to Mass, or because I take Sunday as a day of rest because God told us that. He commanded it in the 10 Commandments. Usually people's approach is like, yeah, church is great and everything, but like, that's a bit much. Like, do you think you're special or something? Or sometimes this happens to me just in like regular interactions. Like if I go get a haircut or I'm checking out at Meijer or something, people always talk about priesthood like it's a job. It's very strange. And the assumption in their words is like, and that's how you see it too. We all know this, They'll be like, yeah, that celibacy thing, crazy, huh? And then I can either be like, yeah, crazy, huh? Or like, what's the alternative? I can say, actually, celibacy is not a cost. I am celibate because the Lord called me to it, and I love Him, and I want to give myself entirely to Him and belong to no one else, and it is one of the greatest sources of joy in my life. That would be super awkward. So most of the time, you just sit there like, what am I supposed to say about this? I found gentler ways, but like there's an assumption like it doesn't really matter that much, Or this other one, when we hear something taught that's like serious and might change our lives and maybe take some adjustment from us, either from a priest or a book or a podcast or talk or whatever, then when it doesn't line up with this kind of casualness, then we got these like weird, I don't know, maybe kind of neurotic responses to them where we just like have to work really hard to shrug them off. Like we say, well, they can't really be serious about that. I'm sure they were overstating it. That's probably hyperbole. Or, wow, this guy's a little bit extreme. Or sometimes people working really hard to do this just on simple things. They'll come up to me and talk to me afterward and be like, yeah, but like you don't really mean that, right? And they're listening for, yes, of course, that would be crazy if that was actually what we meant. But what's funny is when I say, when they say, like, of course, it's not really like that. It's not really that serious. People can go to hell. When I say, yes, that's exactly what I meant, and it is very serious, because they're this is the work to like make sense of what they heard. Even though I'm saying, yes, it's very serious, that's exactly what I meant, they walk away saying, yes, I knew that wasn't what you meant. I'm glad we got that clarified. I'm like, what did I just not, what's going on? So it's a weird thing, and it happens to me all the time. This kind of oppressive casualness about it. Like, it doesn't really matter that much. Just take it or leave it, If it's good for you, that's great. Here's some other examples, okay? Because I didn't use these at the homily last night, and I don't think the point really came across. So I'm just gonna give a few more of these. I better move quick though. Sometimes people, and they say this to me, which is just so bizarre. Like, have a little shame or something, be a little more nervous or scared of me or something like that. But they'll be like, oh yes, my parents, they're super Catholic. They're really into this. They go to Mass twice a month. You're like, okay. But like that label, really Catholic, kind of extreme, like that makes it so that like us normal people, oh, well, we don't have to do that. Or this has happened before. We have somebody, this happens just a few times every year, actually. Either a high schooler from here or a college student who's here or whatever. They're interested, they're maybe being called by God to serve in some sort of mission, as a net missionary, or on Focus, or on Totus Tuus, or whatever. And they will share it with their family, and this is like this precious thing. Like, could it be that God wants me to do this for him? And when they talk to their families, they're so discouraged and disappointed, because all they get from their families is like, well, yeah, but what's that going to do to the optimization of the rest of your life? Like a gap year or two? What about college? What about career? Now, like the families are well-intentioned. They're talking about financial stability and responsibility. That's great. But what has happened is that there's a choice between mission and like giving a substantial amount of your time and energy specifically in service to the Lord, and finances. And we chose finances. That's the more important thing. That's the more serious thing. Okay, another one is that I don't think there are any kids here who are dentally neglected. Okay, what I mean by that is that all the parents here teach their kids to brush their teeth, and it doesn't matter whether your kids want to brush their teeth, they're going to do it. And maybe you let it slide one day or something, because it's really, you got to pick your battles, I understand. But like, your kids are going to brush their teeth, But then this happens often enough in the confessional. Have a smaller child, and you say, okay, thanks for good confession. For your penance, would you pray the Hail Mary 2 times? And they say, I don't know that prayer, Father. Okay, could you pray the Our Father 2 times? I don't know that prayer. Whoa, so I sort of want to ask them, do you brush your teeth? Your parents did teach you that. That's good. But what happened here, weirdly enough, is that in the practice, dental hygiene beat out knowing and loving God. Like, what? I'm sure that wasn't the intention, but that is important enough to get done, and the other things, memorizing the Our Father, praying the Hail Mary, got left behind. So even though there wasn't that choice, that is what happened. I don't have to say a lot about this. I'm just going to mention it, though, because it's summer, and there's sports and travel sports and baseball and all this stuff. We often are faced with this choice, like, well, I can do one or the other. I can be at Mass on Sunday, or I can play this game. And we have to choose. And you can't have both. And it actually matters. Here's just one more. This happened when I was, before I was here at St. Luke, I was a chaplain at West Catholic High School. Now being here, like working with high schoolers, with college students, I get to see these kids in conversion, where they realize the goodness of God and the truth of the gospel. And so they want to change their lives, and they want to be faithful, and they want to give of themselves, and they want to receive what God has for them. And so it starts with, I will go to Mass every Sunday from here on out. And it's beautiful to see. You can just like see them become free and alive. And while they're here, they're encouraged and supported. All of you here, like, you're ready to encourage them. People say, like, it's so good that you're here, or it matters that nobody forced you to come to Mass and you're here. So they're supported while they're here, but then sometimes they go home and they get ridiculed, actually. Again, both in the high schoolers and the college students. And with the high schoolers, it was less understandable, because these kids are being sent by their parents to a Catholic school. And when they can't come home and Sunday comes around and they say, Mom and Dad, I want to go to Mass, then they tell me, not only did my parents not want to go to Mass with me, but they made fun of me for thinking that I should. So in these kind of situations, like, what I say to them is, going to Mass on Sunday is not extreme, not at all. You can throw that out. Some people think that, but they're wrong. Going to Mass on Sunday is not extreme. In fact, it's minimum, it's normal. Or people will say about Sunday Mass, well, how can we go every Sunday? Well, like, we have lives. And then we have to say, there's no life without God. You can call it whatever you want, but without him, it is not life, in fact. We won't even go into, like, when somebody, like, starts, like, maybe going to Mass on a weekday or praying at home. Like, very quickly, parents get really suspicious and kind of fearful, like, my child is becoming some sort of extremist, some sort of radical. Like, no, that is not what this is. What's amazing about all this, though, okay, what I want to show by these examples, not to condemn, not to judge, I'm not even trying to give you like an examination of conscience. I'm just trying to point out the thing that's in the air that goes kind of unnamed and unnoticed, but that is constantly pushing on us. Because I think that for all of you, if somebody held a gun to your head and said, renounce Jesus or we'll kill you, I think all of you would die for the Lord. However, this is the weird thing about this. When we go on vacation and there's a church down the road and Sunday morning comes around, though we would brave a bullet, we don't want to get out of bed. The church is not interested in extremes. What we're trying to talk about is just like a skewed sense of normal. To follow the Lord in like the most committed, deep way usually looks very normal. It doesn't look extraordinary. It's not really loud. It's quiet and peaceful and calm. That's why we say Christians are like the soul of the world living in the body. You can't see it, but it's there and it gives life. Or it's like the leaven of the world that gives it life, though you can't find it in the dough. But though most of the time it's ordinary and normal, there are moments of difference. And those are the critical moments when because of who we are, we actually have to take a route that is different than whatever everybody else, someone who doesn't know and love the Lord. And those are the moments that I'm trying to point to. These are the moments where it's easy to cave because it doesn't look like it matters. Just one more example, just to say that it matters. It matters that you go to Mass on Sunday, not just for you and your eternal salvation, but for the people around you. Because you've been to Mass before where there's like 6 people there, and it's terrible. And then you've been to Mass before, and the 6 people never sing either, you know? So it's just like a soul-sucking thing. You've also been to Mass before with hundreds of people or thousands of people, where people are, like you can tell in their posture, in their voice, in their face, whatever, that they mean it. And it does something to you. That's their witness affecting you and your witness affecting them. Something as simple as going to Sunday Mass, this is a chance where we witness to the truth rather than renounce it for a lie. Here's the end, okay? Things get twisted, and God and Jesus and goodness and worship, all of these get twisted into looking like burdens. And so when we need a break, when we go on vacation, we say, I need a break from those things too. But these are not burdens. This is our liberation and freedom. This is life and resurrection. This is the source of joy and hope. And without it, there is no rest. There is no life. There is no freedom. But it's an incredible thing that slowly happens without us noticing. It happens to me too. It comes around. Corpus Christi, Sunday night Mass, looked pretty burdensome to me. And I have to remind myself, like, no. To celebrate Mass is not a burden, even if it's sweaty and I'm hot and tired. This is life. This is to be with love itself. The other thing is that very, very slowly, it kind of falls over our eyes where the casualness sets a limit that says you can love Jesus, but only this much. And if you go further than that, you're weird, you're an inconvenience, you're an extremist. No. Everything else in life has to be limited. But our relationship with the Lord is the one thing that there are no boundaries to, that nothing can infringe on, that nothing can limit, because this is the thing that gives us freedom for for everything else in our lives. So on the Feast of Saints Peter and Paul, on the Feast of Saints Peter and Paul, meditating on the blood of the apostles and the seriousness that it preaches, even till today. We have to say, are we embarrassed by them and how seriously they have taken the Lord and the gospel, or are we to be embarrassed for ourselves? The church is not some sort of cutesy club. We're here for the salvation of the world.